Hello, everybody. I start this panel. This is the only panel devoted to political economy, and in particular, to the political economy of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the sanctions. So in this panel, we will be having three communications. The first one is consecrated to the idea of political economy in Iran in general during the last 46 years, and Anfal. For those who are not very familiar to the theology of Shiite Islam, it will be a little bit difficult to know right away what does it mean. That's the first part. In fact, the first presentation is mine, just to give an outlook of the general framework. The second part is a talk by Bahman Ahmadi Amuie. He sent his talk and it is being translated from Iran. It is being translated into English. As we know, he's one of the best journalists, economic journalists in Iran. He was being in jail, and he had a lot of experience about the real functioning of the political economy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And he will be talking about privatization. Privatization since 2005, 2006, is a very important key period in recent economic reform in Iran. So he will be giving details about this privatization and to which extent this privatization was in fact Islamization. And the third communication will be a kind of reflection, analysis, and quantification of the impact of sanctions. And Professor Mohammad Farzanegan will be having this important task to give us an idea how functions and the political economy of functions sanctions functioned in Iran. So I start, with the first communication. You will let me know to start at 20 minutes. Okay, first, the topic is Anfal and the political economy of the Islamic of Iran. Please, the second, next. So this talk is based on two documents. The first one is my book, 2023. And the second one is a publication in Public Choice, Islamic Revolution and Anfal. Please go ahead. So just a few words. This study is based, first of all, on three stylized facts. The first stylized fact is that what we have in Iran is not Islamic revolution, but Islamic revivalism. Why is it so? It is very clear. Because all the story about Islamic revolution is a turn to the Islamic government, to Quran and to tradition. It is not revolution in the modern sense, as it is said by Brodel. It doesn't see future. It is going to the past. Okay. The second point, The second point is that the Islamic revolution can be resumed, summarized in one word. The conquest of the power by the clergy Shiites and the establishment of what we call Velayet Faqih, the jurisconsult of the vicegerent. And the third, which is very important, is that this is the only Islamic revolution since 1979 till now, which cannot be limited, confined to political revolution. It was an overhaul of the whole economy and society. This is what has been underlined by Timur Kuran, who is a specialist in economics of Islam. So here, you should not limit yourself to the analysis of the impact of Shiite clergy on politics, but you should also see what are the new economic institutions. Okay, and the problem is that while many social scientists from different walk studied, explored Velayet Faqih, they completely ignored in Iran what I call it Anfal, and we will find it again together today. So our journey is to focus on a point which has not been explored sufficiently by social scientist scholar in Iran. In general, economist has outlined, has described political economy of Iran, post-revolutionary political economy of Iran in two broad perspectives. The first one is to study it as a kind of statist populist socialism or common economy. And the second is to analyze it as a free market capitalism, or sometimes it is said new liberalism. You have the name of the authors here. If I want to give you just one idea, conventional economists, and by conventional economists, I mean advisors to the government, like Masoud Nili, like Moussa Ghani-Nejad, and Mohammad Tabibian, they all consider Iranian economy as a so-called command economy, like Soviet type economy or a statist populist. Whereas those who are more, say, leftish, they consider that the Iranian economy is rather free market economy or new liberalism. The head of this story is Sohrab Mehrdad. Please. Now, in the introduction, I have to say one of the papers which is usually often referenced is Timur Kuran in the Journal of Economic Literature, one of the leading journal in economics in 2018, and he tries to give an account of what happened in Iran. And he says that the political economy of Iran can be regrouped in two steps. The first step was 1979-1992, roughly the period just after revolution at the end of the 8-year war with Iraq. This period, according to Mehrdad, and following Mehrdad, according to Quran, is the period during which we have statism and populism. There is a second phase starting from 1992, the end of 8-year war, IMF and the other, World Bank coming to Iran, also negotiating with the cabinet of Rafsanjani. And this period is known as free market capitalism or new liberalism. What is my contribution is that in two types of description, we have either socialism or capitalism. What I offer is to consider the importance of Anfal. Anfal goes back to Shiite theology. And what is Anfal about? It means that all ownerless public goods, including oil, or what is named in Roman laws res nullius, belong exclusively to supreme jurisconsult. And that enhances confiscatory regime promoting rent-seeking through political channels of Anfal. So, Velayat Faqih and Anfal means the Imam, the supreme leader, has the exclusive possession of not only sovereign power, but also property rights on public resources. They create an economic system that undermines private property rights, create failures in the state functioning, and lead to both market and state failures. I have called it Shiite political capitalism, please. So the talk will go in 3 steps. The first one, what is Anfal in Islam and in Shiite jurisprudence? Second, what is Anfal in the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran, 1979? And the third, what is Anfal in practice? And a very short conclusion will follow, please. So, what is Anfal in Islam? Anfal, if you look on internet, you find 2 things. Anfal as the pseudonym for the bombardment, chemical bombardment of Kurdish people by the cousin of Saddam Hussein. And the second thing which you will see is this. Anfal is a surah, 8th surah in Quran, which has 75 verses. The first verse is come to Prophet, Apostle, how we can divide the booties of the war in Badr. Badr was the first holy war which, Prophet could expand its power. And there was a lot of conflict. I don't go into details. Prophet, looking into all these stories about how to divide the booties, said that I have to get the permission from God. And God sent this surah, and this surah was that the holy war was won because of the God. And in the absence of the God, Prophet decides how it should be divided. And now everybody should follow the rule announced by the Prophet. So that was the story of Anfal, meaning that the booties will not belong to the warriors. The booties belong to Prophet. Of course, in that same surah, 41, brings the idea of homes, that Prophet does not possess everything. He only possesses 1/5. But I don't go into details. From there comes the idea of Anfal. And etymologically speaking, Anfal means booties and moreover an extra sum over what is required. Because the whole conquest is because of the God. If we give you something more, materially speaking, this is something in excess that God pays. Otherwise, you have absorption of the God, and this is the most important price for someone who is believer. So I have to say there is a big split between and in different, in fact, divergent and opposed interpretation of what is Anfal. For Sunnis, they narrowed down the scope of Anfal and relegated all the apostles' belongings to the Islamic State. Abu Bakr, one of the first things he said is that Fadak, which was a city claimed by Muhammad's daughter Fatima, he said no. The Prophet has no heirs. So all things delegated by Prophet will belong to the Islamic State. So they narrowed down Anfal, but they extended the idea of other types of public resources. But Shiite is exactly the reverse, the opposite. They said not only the booties, but all public resources without any owner belong to the supreme jurisconsult if Prophet does not leave. Instead, they have to do. Please. So, if you look, the importance of Anfal is in organizing public finance. I say public finance in a country in which there is oil, and public finance means how to divide the share of oil, okay? And in a country which has done a revolution, so confiscation of the properties of the Shah and those who were close to Shah was a key question. Now, there are several types of elements which enter into the public finance of Islam. From Haraj, which is Islamic tax on conquered lands. This is the form favored in Sunnite Islam. Then Muqasemat, Khoms, Zakat, alms, Jizya, and fines. And you have these 6 types. Among these 6 types, Sunnis put the emphasis on Kharaj and Shiites on Anfal. Please. So, I will not go through all of this. This is what Anfal is composed of, okay? These all res nullius. But I would say there is 3 big categories. The first category is all the properties confiscated from the king as usurpator and the king as tyrant. So that means that Bunyad Pahlavi, all the foundations belong to Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran, will go to Anfal. The second thing is what is taken during the war period. That is under some consideration will go to Anfal. And the third thing, which is not, the least among these all elements, last but not least, is the idea that natural resources belong to Imam. By natural resources, what do I mean? I mean, first of all, oil, okay? And there is, we will see how it has been represented in constitution, but it also means mountains, like Damavand. Perhaps you have read in journals that Iran exports a lot of sands to the Emirates, to the Gulf states, and also exports to Turkey. These are taken from Damavand, and Damavand is shrinking. But to whom it belongs? To Bunyad Mustazafat, to Anfal. Please go on. So What is the role of Anfal in the Constitution? It is Article 45. I read this article because it is very important. Anfal and public wealth, such as barren lands or abandoned land, mineral deposits, seas, lakes, rivers, and other public waterways, mountains, valleys, forests, marshland, natural forest, unenclosed pasture land, legacies without heirs, property of undetermined ownership, and public property recovered from usurpers shall be at the disposal of the Islamic government to act in accordance with the public interest. Law will specify detailed procedures for the utilization of these elements. Okay, that is being taken by Khomeini as an element that in every government we need it. Okay, please next page. So just one point before speaking about this new slide. If you look into foreign translations, and I mean official foreign translations of Article 45 of the Islamic Republic Constitution, English, French, German, Russian, because those are the one which I have checked, you will not find the word Anfal. So it is intentionally hidden. We call it to conduct without any light. So don't create any veil in fashion, okay? So you can imagine there is a revolution. Khomeini comes to Iran as Imam. And now what he claims, that not only what belonged to the Shah belongs to me, I have to add to it oil, I have to eat damavand, and I have to add to that Caspian and the other things, and so on and so forth. That will be shocking for everyone. Who is this new guy? And who is this, this type, who you ask such a kind of, fortune? But I have to say that these public resources do not belong to Imam as a personal belonging. In other words, Imam cannot be bequeathed, put it as a heir for his children. This goes from one Imam to another Imam. It has a statutory power. It is institutionalized property. That should be mentioned. Okay, so the Imam in Islam, in this sense, we have two public treasuries. One public treasury is all the resources that belong to all Muslims. This is the formal state. And this formal state have a kind of, how to say it, budgeting, always in November of each year, what we, check and we control by the parliament, Islamic parliament, is the official budget. Official budget belongs to all Muslims. But it is not the second treasury, the treasury of Imam. Since the treasury of Imam or Anfal cannot be overlooked, parliament, executive power, judiciary power, they do not have any right to require information and investigate about the activity of Anfal. Anfal is under purview of the Imam only, exclusively. So you have two systems of Anfal, and you have also the idea of two central banks. Okay, imagine in this country how we can control inflation when we have two circuits for the entrance of currency, hard currency, meaning dollars. And when, the control of one circuit is completely covered, not disclosed. Okay. So the second thing which is very important, I said it, that oil is also Anfal. Where is it? It is Article 2 of the Iranian Petroleum Act of 1987, adopted by Islamic Parliament and also by Shurای Negahban, as well as under the presidency of Mr. Rafsanjani. You have this. I will not go all through it, but oil exploitation and income are appropriated not only by the formal state, but by all institutions related to Anfal. What does it mean clearly? We have 16 refineries in Iran and 5 petrol company, over 16 refineries, only 2 refineries, one in Tehran and one in Abadan, belong to the formal state. The 14 others are dispatched among, as Anfal, among institutions under the purview of Mr. Said Ali Khamenei. It is Bunyad Mustazafan and the rest. Please, the next page. What is Anfal in practice? Now, it is very important to know that what I have said, this is not just theoretical things in Islam in general. The important thing is that what is the impact of this Anfal? The impact of Anfal is that we have 4 major conglomerates that control almost 60% of property of this country. And they all belong to Anfal. What are these institutions? The first one is Bunyad Mustazafan, Foundation for the Downtrodden, which was created in March 1979, meaning 1 month after the revolution. Okay? What happened then? What has been confiscated from Pahlavi regime and his associates we did not nationalize them. They have been concentrated under Imam Khomeini. So Khomeini controlled these things and create Bunyad Mustazafan. Okay, this is very, very important to say what is confiscated in Iran, post-revolutionary Iran, is not necessarily nationalized, as it was the case, for example, in Soviet Union. Okay, the second one, which is the major one, is Setad, the execution of Imam Khomeini's order, EIKO. It is 2 months before the death of Khomeini, 1989, after the end of the 8-year war. Khomeini gave a verdict, okay, and in which he said that all the possessions of the confiscated properties of the persecuted religious minorities, like Baha'is, okay, as well as all the property abounded during the war, as well as what is gained illicitly, okay, which did not respect religious, procedures, they all belong. And there is one, 49, the Article 49 of Constitution is related to creating tribunals, how to control these properties. They all belong to this new institution under the purview of Imam. Second institution, we have a report by Reuters investigations between 11 to 13 November 2013, which at that time, 2013, accounted the amount was almost $95 billion in 2013. Please go ahead. The third one, before the third one, the third one is Khatem al-Anbiya. Khatem al-Anbiya is the headquarters, the construction headquarters or the economic organization of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Is the third major force, which combine many, fortunes. And it is extremely important why Imam considered this as parts of his property. You will be having a good explanation in the next talk of Bahman Ahmadi Amuie, why and how we proceeded to privatize. So I leave this to Bahman to explain us why Sepah, Pastaran, was in fact the most important thing for him. And finally, Astane Quds Razavi. It was in fact what we call it Waqf endowment. After the revolution, Waqf changed its place. It becomes part of the Anfal organization. Okay. Now, if you sum up all these 4 conglomerates, it comes to what I said, 60% of the property of the whole country. Please, the next page. So, Anfal has not progressed in one day or in one night. It got 3 phases. The first phase is during 1979-89, during which Anfal dominated over welfare system and created Islamic or martyrs welfare system. Okay. The second phase started in 1989 till 2005. It's period of Khatami as well. In that period, Anfal dominated banking system, created huge Islamic banking system. And the third phase starts by the privatization. We call it, in fact, as you will see, the decree, the general policies pertaining to Article 44. It's under this name, or privatization. This is the period Anfal dominates. We call this period Islamic Revolution in economy. And economic Islamic Revolution means the domination of Anfal. It was not privatization, it was Islamization. Please go to the next page. Here you have a table. I cannot go through all the stuff, but you can read my book or my article to see it. If you see what happened after privatization in between period 2005-2011, okay, and 2011 is the start of sanctions, and you would see how much sanctions benefited the Anfal sector. Sanctions was against people, but beneficial for Anfal or Velayet Faqih, okay? And you will see that this was not going to private sector. Private sector, properly speaking, constituted between 5 to 13.5%. And there are two kind of, report, one by the parliament and the other by the legislative power, by the judicial power. Judicial power says 5%, and parliament investigation 13.5%. The rest of it is the transfer of the property of the state to Velayet Faqih para-estatal. Okay, this is my conclusion, that Khomeini's decree was about further Islamization rather than liberalization of the Iranian economy. It culminated in an economic Islamic revolution in the third phase of Anfal, which can be coined as the Shiite Islamic capitalism, different both from socialism and free capitalism. Thank you for your attention. So now we will go to the second presentation. The author is not present, but his book is there. Unfortunately, the book is not translated yet in English, but the book is, accessible in Persian, and you can have it. And the book is really a jewel, because there are many, many field studies with empirical knowledge how privatization happened. This is Bahman Ahmadi Amuie, a journalist, economic journalist.
سلام و با تشکر از استاد گرامی جناب آقای دکتر مهرداد وهابی که زمینه حضور من رو در این جمع فراهم کرد. من تبارشناسی و خصوصی سازی در جمهوری اسلامی و اینکه در 40 سال گذشته چه مسیر رو طی کرده تا به اینجا رسیده رو در 3 مبحث خلاصه می‌کنم و خدمت دوستان ارائه میدم. اولین مبحث ماهیت و ایدئولوژی و تفکر پشت اون هست. 2 روش و نحوه انجام کار. 3 هم نتایج و دستاوردهاست. بالاخره کار از اینکه موافق یا مخالف باشیم و دستاوردهای مثبت و منفی داشته که میشه اونها پرداخت. ماهیت تفکر پشت اون به باور من حکومت‌هایی که روش‌های غیر طبیعی سیر حرکت جوامع چون انقلاب و کودتا برای سر کار اومدن رو طی می‌کنن، ناچار به طبقه سازی، ایجاد گروه‌های ذی‌نفوذ همفکر، ارادت سالاری و نوچه پروری می‌شوند. هر کدام از این گروه‌ها افراد و طبقات نیز برای اونها یک کارکرد و یک تاریخ مصرف داره، ولی ایجاد نگهداری اونها طبیعتاً هزینه‌هایی برای حکومت در پی داره که باید اونها رو بپردازه. این هزینه‌ها رو از کجا تامین میکنه؟ از منابع عمومی. در واقع حکومت‌های توتالیتر و اقتدارگرا برای طبقه سازی و نوچه پروری و ارادت سالاری منابع عمومی رو در اختیار میگیرن و اونها رو در واقع به عنوان املاک شخصی خودشون در اختیار افراد همراه و همسو قرار میدن و گروه‌های همسو تا به اهداف و خواسته‌های خود برسن. هانا آرنت اینو خیلی خوب توضیح میده. در کتاب عناصر و خاستگاه‌های حاکمیت توتالیتر می‌نویسه که حاکمیت توتالیتر مانند فاتحی بیگانه به گنج‌ها و ثروت‌های کشور خود تنها به منزله منبع غارت می‌نگرد که این امکان شرایطی رو فراهم میکنه تا او بتواند برنامه‌هایش را برای فتح جهان به پیش ببرد و این بهره‌کشی چپاولگرانه نظاممند پایانی نداند. یعنی تا وقتی که ساختار حکومت توتالیتر بر سر پاست، این غارتگری منابع عمومی از روش‌های در اختیار قرار دادن منابع عمومی به گروه‌های هدف ادامه پیدا خواهد. در این راستا مال خودسازی اموال عمومی رو سرلوحه برنامه و اهداف خود قرار می‌دهد. یک فرانت همه جانبه و ادامه دار در دسترسی مناصب اداری، تحصیل، امتیازات اجتماعی، پاداش‌های شغلی و اقتصادی رو به تمام افراد و گروه‌های همراه و همسو خود ارائه می‌دهد. در نتیجه مسابقه برای دسترسی به این رانت همه جانبه تبدیل به سبک زندگی تک تک سلول‌های جامعه و افراد می‌شود، به گونه‌ای که هیچ فرد، خانواده و نهاد اجتماعی و اقتصادی نمی‌تواند در خارج از این روابط فاسد ادامه حیات داده و زندگی کند. آشناپروری، نوچه سالاری تبدیل به یک روال عادی زندگی می شود. بودن در یک باند و گروه خاص ضامن ادامه حیات است و این باندها و گروه ها اقتصاد فساد اون حکومت رو شکل میدن. جمهوری اسلامی هم از این موضوع مستثنا نیست. یارای یک ساختار اقتصاد فساد خاص و منحصر به فرد خودش است که اون رو میتوان در بررسی پدیده خصوصی سازی مورد شناخت دقیق قرار داد. اما روش و نحوه انجام کار، وقتی شما اقدام به طبقه سازی، نوچه پروری و ارادت سالاری میکنید، باید منابعی برای ایجاد اونها داشته باشید. این منابع همان منابع عمومی و متعلق به تمام مردم کشور و آیندگان آن است که به وسیله حکومت استفاده می شود. البته برای چگونگی استفاده از آن باید راه حل‌هایی نیز طراحی کرد. یعنی در واقع توجیهات ایدئولوژیک متناسب با اون ساختار حکومت ایجاد کرد. جمهوری اسلامی با توجه به اینکه نگاه مذهبی داره، این توجیه ایدئولوژیک رو خیلی خوب فراهم کرده. الان شما می‌بینید که ما در جایی هستیم که همه جا صحبت از بین رفتن تمدن و تمام منابع ایران میشه، یعنی منابع آب، برق، خاک، منابع انسانی، تمام سرمایه و همه به هدر رفته و از بین رفته. در واقع در 40 سال گذشته جمهوری اسلامی فقط ایران رو به مثابه گاو شیرده دوشیده و کمترین تزریق منابع رو برای تجدید اون منابع به خود این گاو انجام داده و فقط ایران رو برای سوء استفاده و استفاده از منابع اون برای پیشبرد اهداف خودش مورد استفاده قرار داده. حالا این اهداف چی هستند و چه کارکردی داشتن موضوع دیگه است. در جمهوری اسلامی تفکری وجود داره که معتقده بخش خصوصی ذاتاً اپوزیسیون پروره و اپوزیسیون ساز. بنابراین باید افسار اون رو خودمون در اختیار بگیریم. برای اینکه دستمون در نره این گستردگی عظیمی که در جغرافیا وجود داره و تنوع بسیار زیادی که در کسب و کار بخش خصوصی وجود داره، بنابراین اون رو باید مهار بکنیم. مهار کردنش هم به این شکله که اولا باید بخشایی از قسمت‌هایی از بخش خصوصی که امکان بزرگ شدن رو دارن کنترل کرد. شیوه کنترل هم به این شکله که بخشی از حاکمیت، حکومت و یا نهادهای وابسته به اون در اون شریک باشن و یا اینکه اجازه حضور بخش خصوصی رو به بخش خصوصی غیر قابل اعتماد رو به اون ندهیم در این ساختار و فقط خودمون و افرادی که متعلق به خودمون هستن وارد این ساختار بشن. برای همینه که شما می‌بینید کلمه‌ای به نام اهلیت در روش خصوصی در جمهوری اسلامی به کار برده میشه. اهلیت یعنی اینکه من برای جمهوری اسلامی میتوانم منافعی رو تامین بکنم فارغ از اینکه توانایی مالی یا فنی انجام اون کار رو داشته باشم. ولی فرد مقابل که توانایی فنی و مالی مقابل رو داره و میتونه انجام بده، اما چون معلوم نیست میزان سرسپردگیشون اهلیت نداره، لذا در واگذاری ها خیلی به اون گرایش پیدا نمیشه و به افرادی داده میشه که اهلیت داشته باشن. این اهلیت هم در دولت‌های متفاوت به سبک و روش‌های مختلف ارزیابی می‌شده که از سال 1984 تا الان به صورت نظاممند و قانونی تبدیل شده به یک سبکی از خصوصی‌سازی در جمهوری اسلامی که در نتیجه شده خصولتی‌هایی که ما اونها می‌بینیم. خب البته جناح راست و چپ از همان دهه 60 اختلاف نظرهایی با هم داشتن در مورد اون اموالی که مصادره شده بود در زیر مجموعه سازمان صنایع ملی اومده گوی. چپ‌ها به نتیجه رسیده بودن که یا ما اونها رو واگذار کنیم به اون صاحبانشون که با نظام و انقلاب زاویه ندارن، یا اینکه همین مدیرانی که خودمون تو این سالها گذاشتیم و اونها رو اداره کردن و یاد گرفتن اداره این شرکت‌ها و بنگاه‌ها و مؤسسات رو اونها واگذار کنیم با یک قیمتی. اما به قول بهزاد نبوی راستا معتقد بودن که اینها باید به خود ما واگذار بشه و میخواستن بزخری بکنن. برای همینه که حکومت بر چسب کمونیستی و گاه لیبرالیسم گرایش به آمریکا و یرها در مقاطع بعد از هاشمی رفسنجانی اینها زده میشد، ولی ماهیت دنبال این بود که فقط از این منافع عمومی در اختیار خودشون استفاده بشه. من خیلی نمیخوام وارد تاریخ چالش‌های خصوصی سازی در جمهوری اسلامی بشم که چه سالی شروع شد، اما یک چیزی خیلی مهم هست و اینجا بگم. وقتی که شما میخواید منابع رو در اختیار خودتون قرار بدید، باید فضا رو فراهم بکنید که افراد و گروه‌ها و نهادهای وابسته با خودتون دسترسی پیدا بکنن به این منابع و امکانات و مؤسسات و شبکت‌ها. برای همینه که ما روند شکل‌گیری سپاه و حضورش در اقتصاد رو توی این سالها شاهد هستیم. نهادهای امنیتی رو شاهد هستیم، کمیته امداد، ستادهای اجرایی زیر فرمان رهبری و حکومت رو داریم، نیروی انتظامی رو داریم، بنیاد شهید رو داریم. اینها هم و نهادهای عمومی مثل شهرداری‌ها و اینها همه به دلیل وابستگی که به حاکمیت دارن نمیتوانند در واقع ورای اون اهلیتی که فرار بخش خصوصی داشته باشه اقدام بکنن و خود به خود مجموعی شدن به نام خصولتی که نه خصوصی و نه دولتی. یعنی طبق قانون تجارت خصوصی اداره میشن، ولی به شیوه‌های مختلف منابعشون اصلا در اختیار اقتصاد واقعی بخش خصوصی قرار داده نمیشه و در جاهای دیگه میره مالیات داده نمیشه، یا اگه ازشون گرفته میشه مالیاتی شفاف نیست که وارد بودجه عمومی بشه. ما دو تا خزانه داریم، یک خزانه‌ای که دولت در واقع اداره میکنه و خزانه‌ای که اصلا خارج از نظارت و کنترل دولت است. اینها همه از اونجا ناشی میشه. به عنوان مثال ما 14 پالایشگاه نفت در سراسر کشور داریم. دولت فقط 2 تای اونها رو در اختیار داره، پالایشگاه تهران و پالایشگاه آبادان. بقیه اونها به نهادهای دیگه که اسم بردم واگذار شده و در واقع بابت حالا اسمشو گذاشتن مثلا رد دیون بدهی‌های دولت، یا اینکه اونها مثلا خودشون ظاهرا خریدن. حالا نحوه مناقصه و اینهایی هم که برگزار شده موضوع دیگری است که میشه اصلا روش صحبت کرد و در موردش حرف زد که اصلا اینا رو چطور برگزار میکنن. ما از سال 68 که موضوع خصوصی سازی در جمهوری اسلامی وارد در واقع یه فاز عملیاتی رسمی میشه تا برنامه سوم، یعنی تا سال مثلا 77 78 اصلا کلمه خصوصی سازی وارد ادبیات اقتصاد سیاسی جمهوری اسلامی نمیشه. چیزی داریم به نام واگذاری که میگن واگذاری ها از طریق بورس مذاکره و مزایده انجام میدادن. اون موقع هم که بورس خیلی فعال نبود، بنابراین می نشستن مذاکره میکردن و یا مزایده در روزنامه ظاهرا زده میشد که مثلا فرض کن به این قیمت حاضر به فروش کدام کارخونه هستن. یکی از معروف‌ترین اینها کارخونه دناست که مثلا قرار بود در این مزایده گذاشته بشه و اتحادیه کامیونداران در واقع اونو بخره، ولی خب با نفوذی که آقای یزدی در رئیس قوه قضاییه داشت به یک مجموعه علمی وابسته به خانم‌ها در داده شد. حالا اینکه پولش رو اصلا دادن یا ندادن حالا یه بحث دیگه است، ولی مهم اینه که این روند ادامه پیدا کرد، به این شکل اتفاق افتاد. بیام در موارد دیگه رو ما همینجور شاهد هستیم. اینکه چطور نهادهای نظامی و امنیتی وارد اقتصاد میشن از همین جاهاست. اینکه در واقع امکان اعتماد به دیگران وجود نداشت، بنابراین باید خود اینها وارد عمل میشدن. عده‌ای در حکومت معتقدن که سپاه باید اونقدر گسترش پیدا بکنه و تقویت بشه تا بتونه در همه ارکان اقتصادی، سیاسی، اجتماعی و فرهنگی جامعه حضور داشته باشه و هر نوع کم و کاستی رو بتونه تأمین بکنه و جبران بکنه. برای همین می‌بینیم که در اعتصابات رانندگان شرکت واحد فعال میشه و اتوبوس‌های سپاه میان مسافرها رو جابجا میکنن. در فعالیت‌های اقتصادی حضور دارد تا فعالیت‌های فرهنگی، تهیه فیلم، سینما و غیره و غیره. و اما نتایج دستاوردها، عمر خصوصی سازی در جمهوری اسلامی تقریبا برابر با خود عمر جمهوری اسلامی، در حالی که در جاهای دیگه، در کشورهای دیگه کل خصوصی سازی ادبیاتش تا اینکه اجرا بشه و عملیاتی بشه از دهه 80 1980 میلادی شروع میشه و تا پایان دهه 1990 میلادی هم به پایان میرسه. از الان دیگه همش رو باید در تاریخ بخونیم که مثلا در انگلستان، فرانسه یا آلمان خصوصی اصلا تعریفش چی بوده، چطور انجام شده و رفت. ولی در جمهوری اسلامی و مثل یک پروژه پدیده اقتصاد سیاسی بی پایان همچنان ادامه داره و در موردش اختلاف نظر هست و در طی این سالها هم هر دولتی که اومده متناسب با جایگاه و فکری که داشته و نوع نگاهی که به مردم و حاکمیت داشته، روش برخوردش با خصوصی سازی هم متفاوت بوده. مثلا طبقه سازی که در دولت هاشمی رفتن به خاتمی شکل گرفت متفاوت بوده. طبقه سازی هایی که یا موجه پروری ها و ارادت سالاری که در زمان احمدی نژاد به این سو صورت گرفت. در اون دو دولت قبلی بالاخره مقداری از شفافیت یا تکنوکراسی، حاکمیت تکنوکراسی وجود داشت. در نتیجه ما با ظهور سرمایه‌داران در واقع تازه به دوران رسیده بودیم که تکنوکرات بودن، تحصیل کرده بودن و اینها این مؤسسات و شرکت ها رو در اختیار خودشون میگرفتن و طبقه متوسط بعدی ایران رو که جنبش های اجتماعی از اون بیرون اومد رو شکل دادن. منتها از سال 84 به بعد خب با آمدن احمدی نژاد و حمایت هایی که از اون شد، شیوه واگذاری ها متفاوت شد. بنابراین ما مهمترین بیشترین میزان حضور نهادهای نظامی، امنیتی و عمومی رو در اقتصاد از همین مرحله به بعد می‌بینیم. خرید مخابرات خیلی ترم موردش هست که در اختیار یکی از شرکت‌های وابسته به نهادهای نظامی هست و همونجور که خدمتتون گفتم واگذاری پالایشگاه و پتروشیمی‌های متعدد به اونها هست، معاودن بسیار بزرگ، بنادر و غیره. همه اینها در اون زمان و به شیوه‌های مختلف به بهانه همون اهلیت داده شده. در این کتابی که من نوشتم چندین مثال مختلف در مورد اهلیت اومده که میشه بهش ارائه کرد و استفاده کرد. بخش خصوصی از اون طرف هم یک بخش خصوصی فاسد، ناتوان و وابسته به دولت و حاکمیته. همواره خواسته های حاکمیت رو در واقع خواسته اجرا بکنه. همین چند وقت پیش یکی از مدیران اتاق بازرگانی گفته بود که ما ادامه حکومت و جمهوری اسلامی هستیم. شرکت ها و سازمان هایی نیست که به نوعی پیش از حد از نظر حاکمیت بزرگ میشن باید کنترل بشن، یا در نتیجه یا تجزیه میشن یا یک نهاد وابسته سهمی در هیئت مدیره اونها میگیره و از این طریق اونها رو کنترل میکنه. نمونهش مثلا فرض کنید همین چند وقت پیش در هفته گذشته در مورد موضوع پلتفرم دیوار مطرح شد که یکی از اعضای هیئت مدیرش گفته بود که حاکمیت به دنبال اینه که بخشی از سهم مدیریتی رو بگیره و بتونه اون رو کنترل بکنه. این روندی از سال 84 بین سو میشه به خوبی در چارچوب اقتصاد سیاسی جمهوری اسلامی مشاهده کرد. من خیلی ممنونم از وقتی که به من دادید و بپوشید با بحث کسوراتی که وجود داشت و کیفیت پایین احتمالا صدا و موفق باشید. قربان شما و بازم تشکر میکنم از اینکه وقت گرانبهاتون رو در اختیار من قرار دادید.
So now last and third communication by Professor Farzanegan on the political economy of sanctions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mehrdad, and thank you for participating in this session after lunch is usually not very easy. So I hope that I manage in 15 minutes, almost like that. So my topic of presentation is about sanctions and internal conflict in Iran. And this is a joint work that I have co-authored with my colleague in University of Hamburg, Ian Goodman. And basically it's focusing on the topic that how international sanctions imposed on Iran affected the domestic conflict in Iran. So it is also related to probably the events that unfortunately we are observing right now in our country. but of course, our focus here was the sanction, not the external aggression. So if you go to the next slide, basically here I have summarized what we usually can expect from the effect of the sanctions on one side. When we look at the purpose of the sanction, why the senders of the sanction, the US, UN, and the other partners impose sanction, what is their goals? When we talk about success of sanctions, the success of sanctions is usually judged based on what you want to achieve by imposing the sanction. There are many reasons that the countries impose sanction on the other countries, and one of those reasons is a regime change in its extreme case. And that was also mentioned under the first office of Trump by John Bolton, that he refers to this idea of regime change on Iran. Later on, he changed his word, but we see more and we hear more even today on the context of regime change. So usually the countries wants to increase the economic pains on those who basically perceive not to follow their norms. And by increasing these economic pains, they hope that the government under the sanction changes politics, its behavior. And it's becoming very popular application of the sanctions nowadays because that is seen to be a substitute for war, right? So if the sanctions are working, there's no need to basically engage directly in a war. So that has become quite attractive. So, so probably the sanctions result to more political instability by increasing the economic damages and reducing the opportunity cost for the people to join the rebellion. On the other side, we can also expect that under the sanctions, the people in a country under sanction, given the fact again that the government is managing the media, can be also present these sanctions as external again aggression, but in the form of challenging the economy and increasing poverty. So the people might also have this feeling of rally around the flag. And in some countries like Iran, this is much more stronger. So in some sense, one could also expect that some forms of internal conflict might even decrease under the sanctions. So the idea in this paper is using an index of sanction intensity, which is available for a couple of years in Iran, and to find out whether the internal conflict in Iran increase or decrease, and also analyze a variety of types of internal conflict. Internal conflict can be defined in different ways. So I have two basic research questions in this study. One basically is here: does higher intensity of sanction increase the internal conflict in Iran? And the second one, basically, whether we do see a heterogeneous response of different types of the sanction, right? So when we talk about different types of internal conflict, it is referring to civil disorder, which are usually classified as protests, strikes, demonstration, anti-government demonstration, which are maybe more visible, more frequent in a variety of countries, also in Iran. Terrorism, which basically is defined using the violence for political purpose. So that is also something that we classify as internal conflict. And the last one is the civil war, which is the most extreme case of internal conflict, right? So that is usually a weaponized conflict between two partners, usually one from opposition or challengers of the state, and the other is the state system. That is basically the civil war. So I'm talking about the risk of all these protests, right? So the index that I'm using are capturing the risks of these protests, these civil disorder and the civil war, not necessarily their manifestation. I will come to that later on when I explain the data. Now, in the context of sanction internal conflict, there are three theories which basically are helping us to understand better these dynamics. One is related to the grievance theory. Basically says that sanctions are planned to increase economic frustration among the population, reduce the opportunity cost for them. That means the other economic alternatives for them becomes less available and less attractive. And as a result of that, it is less costly to join the rebellion, right? This is definitely one possibility, especially in the country like Iran, that the demographic structure is quite young. So the youth bulge is significant and the youth unemployment rate is also high. So these economic dissatisfaction might be one reason to see that the sanction increase the conflict. The other one is a bargaining theory, which discusses that the sanctions basically reduces information asymmetries between the conflict partners. So the country under sanction, for example, Iranian government received a sanction from the US or EU. So they basically revise their calculation. They know that the country which is imposing the sanctions is also ready to engage in a more violent way. The next step after that would be military. So in that sense, they know their position, they're strange, and if they behave logically and they do not miscalculate, so one expect that they might seek a more peaceful way to deal with their opposition, right? So the bargaining theory basically also expect that under sanction, the risk of internal conflict should decrease, not increase, because that, as I said, that makes the things more transparent. So if I repress the opposition, the U.S. Might not stop by sanction. They might go one step forward and things like that. And last one, which is also quite important in context of Iran even today, is the rally around the flag effects. Country under sanctions, of course, the government can communicate that as a aggression by those who have the economic control to pursue the policies to challenge the independence of the country, to basically bring a nation under the control, and that should be deal with that. And we know also I would also show to you some statistics with respect to the national pride of Iranian and their willingness to fight when the country is under the pressure from the World Value Survey that has increased over the last years. So these also predict that the sanctions might unite the nations and might even amplify, might even help the state administration becomes more powerful. So I have two hypotheses. We have two hypotheses. We are going to test it with our data and the model that I would also explain. Number one is saying that increasing the sanction intensity, which I would show it to you the data, increase the likelihood of internal conflicts in general, regardless of what type of conflict we talk about. And the second hypothesis about the decreasing risk of civil war as a result of higher economic sanctions. Now, with respect to the data and the period of analysis, so these data that we have are available at the quarterly level, and it's available from 2001 to 2020. So it's a good amount of years, which basically shows both before and after 2011 international sanctions. Dr. Vahabi already said that the sanction started in 2011 under the Obama administration, but the experience of Iran with the sanction also was before that under the Clinton and the Bush. Even before, I mean, since the Islamic Revolution, Iran was under a variety of sanctions. Of course, the highlight of these sanctions was the Obama oil embargo, which also collapsed. Sanction intensity is basically is not our calculation. Is coming from the Lodati and Pesaran study published in Journal of Applied Econometrics. Basically, they build this index based on the reflection of the sanctions on Iran in international media, U.S. and U.K. media, Wall Street and Guardian and things like that. So they monitor, they analyze the coverage of the sanction in these international media, and to what extent this has been reflected in these newspapers. Obviously, when the sanction was more stronger, was much more relevant, this was covered by these media in a more visible way, and when that was not very important, that was decreasing. So therefore, up and down. In the next slide, I will show you the trend of this index. Internal conflict data coming from International Country Risk Guide, which is from Political Risk Services, a U.S. company, which basically calculate these indexes, political risk for businesses, for those who are looking for investment. And one of those indexes is internal conflict, which is divided on terrorism, civil disorder, and the civil war. Again, we have the data on the month level for this conflict. We converted it to quarterly in order to be consistent with the other data. We also control for Iranian economic growth, oil export, other important factors when we talk about internal conflict. Is not only sanctions which affect conflict, but we need also to take into account the other macroeconomic factors which basically are relevant. And methodologically, I don't go into details of that, given the fact that I have one country and over the time, so this kind of time series analysis, you're familiar method, and the variance decomposition analysis in post-response analysis. So in post-response is something that I show you to the results. In post is the shock, and response is the response of other variables to that shock. So here the shock is the sanction. I give a shock to the sanction intensity, and I simulate the response of internal conflict indicators to that shock using these historical data that we have. We've simulated for future. Right. So these trends show you, I mean, this is the index of Lodati and Persaran, the sanction intensity of Iran. It is a index from 0 to the 1. So 0 is the minimum of this index, and the 1 is the maximum. And as you can see, the sanction, I've got the data is from 1988 after the Iran-Iraq war. So they built this index from that time. And you see, Iran has been always under variety of the sanction with different levels of intensity. The peak of these intensity achieved in 2011, 2012 under the Obama sanctions, and then decreased during the GCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Barjam, during the Barjam period, as you can see in 2016. Then again, of course, during the Trump 2017 election, 2018, this increased. So this is a picture. So to just summarize the main results and the main findings, what I found in this research is that increase in the sanction intensity increase the risk of civil disorder and terrorism, and the response of civil war, the risk of civil war to increasing the economic sanction intensity was decreasing. Right, so in a sense, not all types of internal conflict increase following the sanctions. So there are some heterogeneity, both in the magnitude and the significance. So the major drivers of increase of internal conflict following the sanction was seen in the case of civil disorder, to some extent terrorism, but not the civil war. The response of other variables such as economic growth and oil export revenues to the positive shock in the sanction intensity was, as expected, negative, right? So this is in line with our expectation. Now, this is the result. So what you see here, what we see here is the response of internal conflict in its general form, including civil disorder, terrorism, and civil war, to a positive shock in the sanction intensity. So the blue line is the response of risk of internal conflict. The dash red lines is basically showing the statistical significance, how much we can trust, these estimations. And as long as that these dash lines does not include the zero line, we can say that the response of our outcome variable is statistically relevant and significant. So as you can see, the civil disorder increased, the internal conflict increased quite quickly following the positive shocks in the short term, within maybe the first 2 quarters. And this positive response of internal conflict to the sanction intensity remain statistically significant up to the 5th quarter following the shock. So that means within the first year, we have a problematic picture in terms of higher increasing internal conflict. After that, it approaches zero. It stabilizes itself. So this is also in line with the literature on the sanction, that in the long-term sanctions are not effective. So a country on the sanction adjusts itself to the sanction situation, to find a way to bypass the sanction, to stabilize itself, like a person with a backache. So in the short term, you have a problem, you have a pain, but in the long term, maybe the body fitted in a way that to minimize the pain, right? So that's the thing, that those who are imposing the sanction are very much looking forward to see the effects of that within the short term, because they know in the long term you find a way to get rid of them, right? Now, I was interested to find out what is driving this positive response of internal conflict, and that is the reason that I look at civil disorder, terrorism, and the civil war. Here is the response of civil disorder, right? Civil disorder is obviously increases following the economic sanction. Again, what I mean by civil disorder is, anti-government demonstration, protests, worker strikes, and all these things, right? So this is definitely increases. And that remains statistically significant, relevant within 1 year after the sanction positive shocks. This is the risk of terrorism. Again, in the context of, risk of terrorism increases. However, it is only significant within the first 2 quarters, in the quarter of 2 and 3 following the shock, and after it has become statistically irrelevant. So that might be the thing that for the Iranian government is more easier to control the terrorism, because it would be presented in a way that these people, these terrorist group basically are, is more easier maybe to justify their repression compared to protester or demonstrate, right? So in any case, but this is what we see here. This is the response of civil war, the risk of civil war, which is in the opposite of other dimension. We see that the risk of civil war decreases following the economic sanction. This decrease is also significant within the second quarter and the seventh quarter. Right. This is what we found out. We thought, okay, what is the mechanism for the case of these responses? In the case of civil war, of course, this is the grievance theory, which is easy to follow, right? So the sanction increases inflation, depreciate the currency, increase the poverty, reduce the size of middle class. So everybody would suffer on that, and some of them may join the protest, demonstration, strike, and so on and so forth. It's not unlogical to expect this going up, right? Terrorism, of course, is rather more, the people who engage in the terrorism, that means using the violence for political purposes, probably they should be much more severely affected by the sanction. They simply see no other chances, whether in the formal part of economy and the shadow economy, to survive. So they find joining these terror organizations the only way to to survive and to reach the goal. So in the context of civil war, of course, this is the effects of rally around the flag. In a country like Iran, which the sense of unity and the national pride is quite significant, civil war meanings, something that we saw it, for example, in Syria or similar countries. It is less likely to manifest to happen under the sanctions, right? So I'm citing here two data from World Value Survey. World Value Survey, maybe you're familiar with that or not. This is basically measuring the attitudes of the people in many countries over the time on different topics. They ask, what I report here is, number one is whether country people are willing to fight if they are getting whether you are willing to fight for your own country, in defending your country, and the other one, whether how much you are proud of your nationality. So I selected 2020 and 2005 because the 2005 is simply before all these sanctions imposed on Iran. That was the end of Khatami and the beginning of Ahmadinejad government. And 2020 was the peak of sanction, right? So Iran experienced Obama and then the Trump sanctions. And 2020 is not including the Corona time. That was, the survey was at the beginning of 2020. So in the case of very proud of nationality, we see that the percent of people who respond that they are very proud of their nationality to be Iranian has increased significantly from 63% to 83%. And by the way, the World Value Survey are representative, or designed in a random way to shows the overall picture of the country. And the fight for own country also, whether you are willing to fight for Iran in the face of aggression, has also increased from 70% to 73%. So those who answered yes, they are willing to fight. So the sanction has not decreased these things, right? So and that could be also somehow argued that the rally on the flag and years of external economic aggression has resulted to more reflection of that on these dimensions among the Iranians. Now, to conclude, what would be the policy implications of these results? I would say higher intensity of sanction may increase instability, so that is definitely the case, but do not seem to ensure regime change or collapse, right? So the sanctions, maybe one reason that the war begins sometimes on some of these sanctioned countries like Iraq, similar one now Iran, maybe is because of inability of the sender of the sanction for regime change, right? So otherwise there is no need to thank you. So this is so the regime change is not achieved, and I would say also in the case of external aggression, this is less likely maybe to achieve. Again, maybe that rally around the flag effect is also strong in the case of war. Limitation of the research is maybe external validity is not because there is only one case study of Iran, so we don't know whether the similar effect is also observed in other sanctioned countries like Venezuela, Russia, and things like that, right? So that would need additional analysis here. Sanctions do not uniformly destabilize government, right? We learned that in some cases even the strange the administration, right? So if the rally around the flag effect is dominated, so we cannot expect the weakening of Iranian government on the sanction. Of course, now the situation has changed, right? So you have the sanction and external aggression, both of them. So it's a very, very hard situation for any government to survive. So they increased the short-term unrest, but reduced large-scale civil war risk. So that was the data on Iran showed to us that sanction had these short-term destructive effects. In the middle term, long term, the state managed to find a way to control it. In the case of larger scale civil war, we have no evidence for that. Future research should explore long-term institutional effect, and this is something which hopefully in the future research we happen to do that. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Now, is there a question? Please.
Yeah, bring the microphone as well. Bear with me. So my question has two parts. Based on what you presented, can we argue that the Islamic economy based on Anfal is inheritingly corrupt, and then building on that, and what we've seen from the beginning of Islamic Republic, sanctions has been an economical drive for parts of military forces as well as the decentralized network of IRGC all around the country and beyond the borders. And there is an argument that exactly because of that, they actively creating a rhetoric that increased the amount of the sanctions and also they increase the possibility of the war that we are seeing right now.
For the first part, I think I should respond. Okay, I would say about the question of corruption. As an economist, we do not consider corruption necessarily as bad thing. Sometimes if you, for example, consider Soviet economy, corruption worked very well in a sense that because there were needs for market activity, corruption was like lubricating the grease which was not working. So we have even a theorem in economics, which is the Coase theorem, which says that if corruption or blackmail can do an reallocation of resources in a way that resources are allocated to people who can maximize their assets, their profit, it's a good thing. So I usually listen to the topics in media that says that here is the systemic corruption in Iran. For an economist, that means that everything's good. Because if there is a need that from bottom to the top, everyone is using corruption means that corruption is functioning well to lubricate the system.
Predictable.
Predictable. But the problem with corruption in Iran is that it is not just corruption. It is a regime of accumulation, meaning that what we have in economics, and it is inspired by Max Weber's thesis, that we have something which is called political capitalism by contrast to market capitalism. Political capitalism, according to Weber, 1905, was to look for profit-making, maximizing profit through non-market channels. So I give you an example. If you look into election in US elections since 2020, you see the amount of electoral expenditure was $15.1 billion. In 2024, it reached to $15.9 billion. Among these $15.9 billion, $5 billion is called dark money, meaning that the donors are anonymous and they are big donors, like all the big digital companies who were being. Okay, what was the compensation? The compensation was that in 2017, the first round of election of Trump, there was a tax cut for corporate and individual, which is unprecedented in the whole history of USA. Meaning that I accept that you pay for my election, and for compensating you, I will reduce the taxes. This is a kind of cycle, tax cut cycles. Thomas Piketty, in fact, what he did in his book in 2013, 2014, was to document this cycle of reducing taxes for compensating the electoral, pain. That's the story of this is political capitalism, modern form, okay? What Max Weber was talking was political capitalism in ancient Rome or in ancient China, which was Crassus, who knew that Rome is always under fire, the buildings are being burnt completely. He was going and to recruit slaves who were architects. And when there was a fire in the city, he would send his architects to rebuild and to take that, to reap off the profit. Now, in Iran, you have exactly, Anfal is this. Anfal is that if you have access to power, you make money. And you make money higher than the rate of economic growth. Because there are 2 points. What is the rate of profit and what is the rate of economic growth? In US, the rate of profit for digital companies are much higher than the rate of economic growth. And during the last 20 years, the economic growth in all OECD countries, including US, European countries, and Japan, was very, very low. The only country which experienced a very high growth rate was India, and next, China, which is, also coming down. Okay, so what I want to suggest is that Anfal is really the way that all people close to Imam are reaping off economic, benefits. And the first one is having the lion's share of allocation of currency, hard currency, which is a way to store money and its value. So is it really corruption? No, it is a regime of accumulation. And this is what I call it patrimonial development, meaning that the rate of economic growth is not added value. It is reassessment every year. In Iran, you have even decline of, if you have deaccumulation all through the 2010-11 till now. If you consider, you have a rate of deaccumulation, meaning that fixed capital has not been recompensated. And so you have electricity power now. You have the problem of electricity, you have the problem of water, you have a kind of breakdown of economy. And we are feeding on our natural resources. We are, how to say it? We are completely destroying the resources for future generation. What we are doing is not preying on existing resources, but in intergenerational resources we are preying. It includes also the story of Damavan and the other. I hope I have answered to the question of corruption, but if you want really a more extensive, it's the 8th chapter of my book on the story of patrimonial development and how it works in Iran and what are the percentage.
Sanction question?
Mehrdad John explains so details on the Anfal that I missed the part related to sanction. What was again your?
So my question is, there's a financial benefits that has been allocated as Doctor explained to a certain part of the military system inside Iran or the government, whatever you want to call it, the existing system in Iran. And throughout years, we've heard the political rhetoric that it sounds like intentionally is asking for more sanctions. And there's arguments that some economists are making that this increasing sanctions, economical sanctions, is not only on the part of the West that is imposing them on Iran. There's a fraction inside Iran government that is seeking out that sanction.
The thing which in Iran they call the Kasabane Tahrim, right? Mm-hmm. That is what those who are seeking for continuation of the sanctions. So that might be the case. As you mentioned, the sanctions brought maybe more market share for some of these. In your example, Revolutionary Guard, for example, who were engaged in big projects in the oil industry and the similar industry, which during the period without the sanction was also open for international companies, Total and so on and so forth. Obviously, the sanction provided a bigger market share for them, right? So, but also one should consider that even these organizations for their projects might still need the access to international finance and the credit, and the sanctions also constrained their access at the end, and so the net effects, whether they have a pure benefit of seeking the sanction system is an open thing. They might gain something, and the other side they might also lose something as a result of these international sanctions. So this is the case. These corruption might basically promote the benefit of segment of society which has a profit in this sanction situation, and the rest of society. Is important that the cost is imposed on the rest of the society, and the overall effect would be negative for the social welfare, right? So, yeah.
Which one first?
Thank you both. Dr. Vahabi, you mentioned the Iranian economy as political economy as well as Shia capitalism. So my question is this type of economy so unique in the world that we cannot find any other economy that we can call it something bigger, something probably more broad? I'm thinking Venezuela, for example. That was my first question. The second question is, there's a group of people in Iran that are making money not using Iranian, not being linked to Iranian economy. What comes to my mind is the YouTubers or podcasters. They're making money based on the number of followers they have, the number of clicks they get. Is this kind of disturbing Iranian economy? Is it part of it? That has always been my question in my mind. Thank you.
Yes, I would like, yeah. Just, I have to say that the term which I use is Shiite political capitalism, meaning that there are different, great variety of political capitalism. I just mentioned that United States economy during the last 20 years can be described, can be characterized as political capitalism. That's what I am suggesting. Iranian economy is political capitalism. I add, Russia is political capitalism. I would say China is political capitalism. I add, India is political capitalism. In fact, what is usually said, neoliberalism, I think neoliberalism entered definitely into crisis since 2008. Since 2008, and then COVID-19, 2021, you have June 2021, the group of 7 who made a conference. I have referred to it several times. And in that conference, we said that there is no more market. This is the solution to all problems, but the state. And what I'm suggesting is that we are experiencing the transformation of neoliberalism to political capitalism at a worldwide level. Iran is just a variant. Shiite political capitalism is unique, but political capitalism is a great variety. So that is a very good question you raised. For the second, would you like to say?
The YouTube or similar activities are part of service sectors, right? So now we have more than 50% of Iranian GDP are in service sector. And basically, this is the most resilient part of the Iranian economy under sanctions, right? Although that industries and manufacturing are suffering during the sanctions. However, the service sector, which is either relying on the domestic market or, as you said, for international clients and so on and so forth, as long as that you have internet connection, digital literacy and things like that, with a relatively low initial capital, you can basically enter the business and contribute also either by higher employment, so you might also employ some other people. So it's a kind of entrepreneurship, right? The business formation in the service sectors with a rather small capital. So I would say this is in general something positive. The problem is maybe the talents and the economy resources move from the sectors which are proved to be more strong in terms of learning effects, a positive externality on the, for example, from industry, manufacturing, the sanction to the service sectors, which is not only employing. When we talk about service sector, is not only the advanced finance market and things like this, but also those who are working construction or simple services with the lowest skills is also part of that. But the problem is some of these talents that who are working in the advanced, sophisticated service sector could contribute more strongly to Iranian economy when they were maybe industry and manufacturing with more stronger positive forward and backward linkage with the rest of the economy. So this allocation of the resources from productive sector to the less productive sector of economy in the general picture might somehow be seen as a negative thing for the sustainable development of country, right? But personally, for individual person, that might be a way for business, money making, and so on and so forth, right? Yeah.
And I just one thing to add. Just one thing to add, that we are, preparing a handbook of political capitalism, which will be published in next, year, 2026, and it will include almost 36, papers, theoretical and applied, and it will substantiate the story of political capitalism in different countries. And we had also an international conference on the same issue, 15th and 16th May this year in Université, at Université.
سوال من از آقای دکتر فرزانگانه و در واقع میخواستم آرگیو بکنم نتیجه گرافاتون رو تحریما اثر کرده، گرافای شما هم نشون داد که اثر کرده. در مورد آفریقای جنوبی هم ما داشتیم که با تحریما رژیم آپارتاید سرنگون شد. چیزی که من از ارائه شما فهمیدم، گفتین که تحریما نه تنها باعث تغییر رژیم نشدن، بلکه با 2 تا گراف 2 خطی، نمیدونم داده هاش از کجا میاد، به افزایش حس غرور و ملیگرایی در رژیم ایران و نه جمهوری اسلامی منجر شدن. در حالی که گراف رو اگر نگاه بکنیم، شما اشاره کردید سال 2011-12 بیشترین اثر رو داشته تحریما و جمهوری اسلامی در تمام مقاطع در برابر تحریم‌های جدی واکنش جدی نشون داده، نرمش قهرمانانه کرده و احمدی نژاد پاسدار رو با بنفش روحانی عوض کرده. در نتیجه تحریما تاثیر سیاسی داشته، در حالی که کل قضیه تحریما به مردم ایران ربطی نداشته و در رابطه با برنامه اتمی جمهوری اسلامی بوده. همین الان هم اگر که پای برنامه اتمی میرفتن با همین جمهوری اسلامی میساختن. در نتیجه من یه حمایت از جمهوری اسلامی و با تولید ادعاهای اون رو میبینم توی ارائه شما که با گراف خودتون همخونی نداره.
So the comment is not very objective, right? So in a way of the point related to the source of data, what I showed to you from World Value Survey is a survey which is conducted by international UK-based company, of course by local University of Tehran. And the method is clear, so you can go to the website of the World Value Survey and check the details and the methodology, and even you can see the data at the individual level. So it is designed to be the representative survey, right? Of course, we can discuss like other types of surveys, you have always the challenges and so on and so forth. So what we do see between 2005 and 2020, which of course is not the only sanction which is intensified in this period. There were the government of Ahmadi Nejad, Rouhani, and later on Raisi. But the most dominant factor which changed during this period with the international sanction, that has not resulted to decrease of national pride, and has not also resulted to decrease of willingness to defend the country at the time of crisis. So we see a positive trend there. So I'm not basically showing that as a causal evidence to make the claim that the sanction has causes this, but it's suggestive to basically use it to explain the results obtained on the decreasing response of risk of civil war to the positive shock in the sanction intensity. Also show that the response of civil disorder and risk of terrorism was positive and increasing, which is in line with our expectation in the economic theory. Frustration, economic grievances by increasing the economic cost of living, increasing inflation, decreasing the value of currency, and all these things resulted to more frustration of the people and higher happening of protests and strikes and so on and so forth, right? So this is also in line with our observation. So that is what the data show. Whether it is in line with your ideological picture, that is a different topic. So no, I analyze.
2012 and 11 that you said that the sanction doesn't work. It works, and the Islamic Republic should change his very extreme president. It is exactly the same regime.
So that, that you exactly say what I said. So they adjust their system to the sanctions, right? That is how the system adjusts itself to the pressure. نرمش قهرمانانه is one of them, right?
Just because the time is
But go to negotiate with Islamic Republic. When they continue this, it will be like the South Africa, and we don't need such an invasion to Iran.
So don't forget that the sanction was reimposed by Trump in 2017 and 18. So Iran was following the international atomic energies that was confirmed. Why you forget that?
I just say one word because the time is out. just to tell you not only about Iran, in general, there is an extensive, literature that economic sanctions are effective only during the first 2 years. From the third years, its impact decrease. And in general, economic sanctions were not effective since Wilson, who used it as a replacement of war. We say that sanctions are especially effective when they are combined with other forces of pressure, such as war, such as war and such as other things. So I don't talk about really Iran only, in general. Cuba is an example. North Korea is an example. We can multiply. But the time is run out. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your attention.